So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Germany is the strongest country in the world. Now, what I mean by that is that instead of the United States being the most strongest country in terms of, economy, military, and a lot of other factors, it's going to be Germany instead. And now this is pretty significant because it's going to change the geopolitical structure of how the world works. And, since the US is considered a military police force in real life, that honor goes over to Germany now. So, instead of the United States being the main country supplying other countries like Ukraine and Israel, it's going to be Germany instead. So essentially we have a swap of America and Germany. And yeah, that's going to make for an interesting scenario since Germany is a lot closer to some of its enemies like Russia and Iran. And yeah, so if you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to show some support on it by leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you are new. We're aiming for 200,000 subscribers by the end of this year. It's a tall task ahead of us. However, I do believe it is possible, especially when we get towards the mid part of the year where, everyone's off of school. And yeah, but hey, getting there any sooner is always better, so support is really appreciated. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump straight into the scenario where Germany is the strongest country in the world. Now, why Germany? Well, because why not? Germany's like the most fun country to map with, and there's also a considerable amount of history that Germany has with expansion, rapid expansion. But that's not the main focus of this video. The main focus of this video is, like I said, how the geopolitical structure of the world would change if power was centralized around Germany instead of the US. Now, we're not saying that the US is now like number 4. They would still be number 2. And it's just more so that Germany is given their resources and adequate population, industry to surpass the United States at number 1. So the US is still number 2, Russia 3, China 4. And we're going to do some time traveling here. We're going to go back before the Ukraine war started in 2022, 2021. When did that? It's been so long now. We're going to be having Russia invade Ukraine again, but this time it's going to be a little bit different with Germany being there. Now, of course, the West's response in real life was fairly slow. Well, it wasn't slow. Ukraine folded pretty quickly, but the Russians will storm in as they did in real life and get very close, and then Western support will come in. Ukraine will fully mobilize, and the Russians will seemingly get kicked all the way back to their border. This is about where it's at in real life now. Nothing great going on here. But with Germany being here, obviously supplying Ukraine is a lot easier, and I would imagine that the support for supplying Ukraine is also a lot greater since it's a fellow European country instead of a foreign country across the world. That's kind of like the main problem with America. If it was Canada being attacked, I'm sure, well, that's kind of a special scenario because of NATO, but ignoring NATO, if Canada was attacked, I'm sure that American public would be a lot more supportive of supplying Canada. Since it's right on our border, it's kind of our interest. Whereas in real life, the American public is kind of split on providing for Ukraine. It's a foreign country across the ocean, so who really cares? But also, it's another one of our allies against one of our enemies. So of course we should supply them, right? I think that problem is kind of dodged with Germany since Ukraine is right there. But yes, German support of Ukraine is there, and it actually makes a little bit more of a big effect. Ukraine is able to take back the key city of Mariupol. Is that what it's called? I think it's called Mariupol. I'm not sure. I'm not going to look it up. No, that's pretty decisive. However, the Russians do pull out a counterattack and take a little bit more land out of Ukraine. And all in all, it's really back and forth. The Ukrainians lose a lot of land and then the Russians take it, and then vice versa. Russia loses a lot of land and Ukraine takes it. But at the end of the war, we have something like this playing out. And Germany is going to be a big facilitator. What am I saying? Germany is going to be the main instigator of peace talks. In real life, the US, I think, tried to do that, but it didn't work or something. I'm not sure. But peace talks finally ensue, and it's not going to be good for Ukraine. However, it's the only way to really appease for Russia, who has essentially won the war. Now, the conditions, though, are a little bit different from what they would have been in real life if the US were to instigate this. So as we can see, Russia gets all of Donbass and Crimea officially, and it's recognized on the world stage. At this point, it's really not looking too bad just to have this happen in real life because the war has been essentially going on for so long and both sides are kind of, not doing great. But we have our official peace treaty here. In real life, one of the conditions would be for Ukraine not to join NATO and the EU. However, in this timeline with Germany's close presence and, they're stronger than Russia, Germany is able to mingle in the peace conference and simply just allow for Ukraine to still join NATO and the EU. And that's exactly what happened. So Ukraine is let into NATO, and Russia's ultimate plan is to stop NATO expansion. Pretty much backfires. So what do the Russians do? Well, they go after Belarus. Except Belarus is kind of like their own country already. So it's more of a unification with Belarus. However, with this, there is a quite I don't want to say there's a large amount of population in Belarus, but there is a substantial amount of people in Belarus who would not be in support of Russian unification and would much rather have a democratic government, especially those people who are near the borders of these other democratic countries. But with Russia's unification, it's considered a very sloppy kind of process. It doesn't go well. There's a lot of things that are left open and unanswered within the unification process. And Germany is going to take advantage of this, and they're going to fund a rebellion within Belarus. Now, funding rebellions, I think the US has probably done that multiple times before, but now it's Germany's turn at it, and it goes pretty well as they manage to make the areas near their own alliance's borders break away. And of course, Russia is going to immediately look at NATO and Germany and say, hey, what the hell? This was obviously you, right? And they say no. So a large, substantial part of Belarus breaks away, and here Russia will now go into a state of kind of, I guess, civil war, but not really. It's a rebellion. They are going to do great things pushing them back, but eventually they do find NATO technology within this rebellion, and it is there that Russia is like, well, okay, this was you. But they don't go to war right away. Obviously not, because that would be boring, right? They fight off the rebellion, they successfully unite with Belarus, and they turn their ambitions elsewhere, specifically down to Georgia. Germany responds to the Russian mobilization of troops in this area by sending their own troops down to the border of Georgia, especially around the contested areas of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. There we see troops in, like I said, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, around the border, and they're kind of there, and Russian troops that were already there are kind of like, what the hell's going on here, right? But Russia refrains from invading Georgia for now. And that's because another geopolitical event just unfolded, this time in the Balkans. Now, in real life, a Balkan all-out brawl is pretty unlikely, considering that NATO has a pretty strong influence over these countries. I mean, half of them are already in NATO, but the countries that are not are heavily NATO influenced, like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. Of course, Serbia is a part of Russia. We all know this, right? They're not a part of Russia, but they're heavily influenced by Russia. But Bosnia and Herzegovina pretty much erupts into civil war. And of course, it's the Serbian parts that are breaking away from Bosnia and Herzegovina. If you don't know, basically, it's just kind of, it's weird what happens here. That's like I don't even, this isn't correct. Don't base your ethnic map of Bosnia and Herzegovina off of this. This is not right, but it's kind of, it's close, I think. Or maybe it's backwards, I don't know. But Bosnia and Herzegovina erupted into civil war, and Serbia will be the first country to join in on this war and helping out their Serbian brothers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Croatia immediately is going to respond to this by joining the war, and from here it gets a little out of hand. Albania, being Albania, will join the war on the side of Croatia, and also joining them is Kosovo. Montenegro declares neutrality as they are kind of in between on this, and a great Balkan war breaks out. Now, the other Balkan countries aren't going to join this war because they're all members of NATO. Of course, Croatia and Albania are members of NATO as well. However, this is kind of their own self-interest thing. You know, they put NATO as a priority in their geopolitical kind of way, but you know, they also have their own self-interest, which in this case, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and for that matter, Kosovo, is within Albania and Croatia's self-interest. So the Serbs will do their best to help out their own Serbian group in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they will enter into parts of Croatia, and we have ourselves the Bloody Balkan War, part 3 or 4. Serbia does considerably well at the start of the war. They even invade into Kosovo and pretty much knock the entire area out of the war. However, Germany will now start to supply its allies, and this is where it starts to get bad for Serbia. Now, of course, Russia will also attempt to, supply their ally, but the issue is Serbia is pretty much landlocked by NATO. Their closest path to supplying Serbia would be going through here, and then I'm pretty sure Turkey would allow them to go through. They would have to go around Greece, up through here, and then through the neutral country of Montenegro. I think that's the most likely one. They just beat Ukraine in a war, so maybe Ukraine just kind of folds and lets them go through, and they go through Hungary, which would probably allow them to do that. But I don't think Ukraine would actually do that because they just lost a war to them. Of course, there's going to be some spite and some pity, so yeah, Ukraine wouldn't allow that to happen. So basically what I'm trying to say is that Russia trying to supply Serbia is pretty much impossible due to the, Serbians being surrounded by NATO. Anyway, like I said, eventually NATO supply does come back in, and the Serbians start getting, you know what's happening here. It's not good. You never want it to happen, but it's happening. NATO troops enter into northern Serbia, and from here the collapse of Serbia is pretty much imminent, as Serbian forces are unable to withstand the forces from NATO. Now, of course, Russia could join in on this war because, you know, NATO troops are actively attacking and being used on the front lines of Serbia, but they don't want to go to war with NATO because that wouldn't be fun for them, right? I mean, maybe they do want to do that. Maybe they're like weird warmonger people. Totally not, right? Anyway, Serbia's last front is, ironically enough, in Kosovo. The Albanians managed to make land, but eventually NATO troops on their own come in and take over the rest of Kosovo, and Serbia loses the war. So we can go ahead and take a look at a peace treaty of this scenario, in which nothing changes on the map. Now, why is that? Well, that's because Bosnia and Herzegovina was allowed entrance into NATO, and Serbia was given a new government, which doesn't join NATO, but is now less pro-Russian and more pro-Western. This is much to the dismay of Hungary and Turkey, who are both members of NATO, who aren't the most democratic members of NATO. But alas, you know, it's, 31 members, they're only 2, so their opinion doesn't matter, right? Anyway, yeah, Bosnia and Herzegovina is pretty much given a new government. It's given a more stable government, and a lot of assimilation and not so great things are happening here, of which it could probably cause another war. But hey, who am I to say anything, right? I'm an American. But with the NATO encounter with Bosnia and Herzegovina, Russia pretty much feels like they have Russia pretty much feels like it has the authority to also invade a country, since, NATO just did it, even though Serbia was the aggressor. So Russia will declare war and start to invade Georgia. Now, remember what I said about Georgia? German troops are there. So when Russia inevitably crosses the border from their already occupied areas, they are met with German gunfire. And, this is, I don't want to say Germany has a lot of troops there, because they probably don't. But it's enough to stir up and start discussion of Article 5. And of course, activation of Article 5 of NATO would mean that all 31 NATO countries, well, at this point, all 33 NATO countries would be required to join the war against Russia. And I think it's important to note that with Germany being the strongest country in the world now, Russia, even more so, doesn't want a war with NATO. In real life, it wouldn't be great. But by having the US separated from the rest of NATO by an ocean is kind of a strategical advantage for Russia in real life. But, with Germany taking the role of strongest country and it being right there, the response by NATO would be a lot more swift and severe for Russia. So they don't want to war with the NATO countries in real life. They even more so don't want to war with them now. And, well, it's shaping up to be that way. So the discussions go through, and it is agreed on that this was a violation of Article 5, and all 33 member states will join the war against Russia. Now, of course, this is a theoretical scenario. Of course, Germany is not the strongest country in the world, and it's not really on the path to be the strongest country in the world. So this is, once again, it's a hypothetical scenario. It's not a real scenario. I think there's actually 34 members now because of Kosovo. I forgot about Kosovo. And also, at this point, Sweden is probably in the alliance as well. Germany's close proximity to Hungary and Turkey would probably speed up their ratification process. So really, I've been kind of underestimating NATO to this point, because they have a lot more members than I thought they did. But yeah, NATO joins this war. None of Russia's allies really are seeking to join this war because it's not a very balanced war, and they would probably end up losing. So for the 50th time on this channel, you will now be seeing Russia lose a war to NATO. And I forgot Montenegro. Okay, there we go. So in this war, Russia will not be making the first step because German troops were already lined up on the borders of Russia. I mean, they do make a little bit of gain in Ukraine, where they already have a strong military presence. But alas, it is for nothing, for the NATO forces are here. Yippee! Okay, so Russia is getting dismantled. I mean, it's not close. It's basically like having the US located in Europe, but more like, what's the word? I don't know what the word is, but they're more close together. And it's, it's not a good result. As we can see, Russia's getting their ass handed to them. I mean, realistically, an invasion of Russia wouldn't go this quickly, it wouldn't go this smoothly, and it would last many years. But unfortunately, this is the AdizzPro channel, and we don't care. So yeah, Russia looks like this, and that's when they surrender. And we can go ahead and take a look at a hypothetical peace treaty, of which there will not be a lot of land exchange, because land exchange is something that only happens with non-democratic countries. What happened? Now, this scenario could be very interesting for some other countries, like if China was the strongest country in the world. This is not what Belarus looks like, but close enough. Like if China was the strongest country in the world, they could start doing whatever they wanted in East Asia. And same thing with Russia. They could start doing whatever they wanted in Central Asia, If India was the strongest country in the world, I'm sure they would solve a lot of their conflicts. So in all reality, this is a very extendable scenario, and I just decided to do Germany because it's like one of the most popular countries to do scenarios with. That still doesn't look like Belarus, but whatever. But yeah, in this peace treaty here, basically Russia gives up all of its claims that it has over all of NATO, and it liberates Belarus, it liberates all the parts of Ukraine, and you know, there could be some land exchange, like with Finland especially, or with Baltics, but I don't really know if they would do that. But in the end, Russia's given a new democratic government, and NATO pretty much rules the world, because without Russia, and the rest of the world relies on China, and that's only one country. So yeah, instead of there being two countries to rely on if you're not pro-NATO, there is now only one, and that one country is kind of fraudulent. So yeah, that is going to do it for today's scenario where Germany is the strongest country. Now, of course, this could have two routes. I took the more peaceful route, of which they don't go rapidly expanding and, you know, taking out their own allies. We chose the more realistic one, which still wasn't really realistic. There is an alternate one where Germany pretty much forms an empire, and hey, I have a whole series on that, so go check out that series if you wanted to see that version of this. This is the toned down version of what if Germany formed an empire. Yeah, they didn't form an empire, they just, you know, used their geopolitical power to influence and change the outcome of world events. So yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, all the support is greatly appreciated. We're pushing for 200,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Very reachable, very possible, but it's very dependent on you guys, and it's also dependent on me for putting out quality content. So yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. And of course, thank you to all the super fans, which include Matthew Newman, Yam, Kali Speaks Plays, Shadow Gamer Z, Deva Edits, Mr. Bonk 7, Hammer Toad 45, Patrick Clauser, Connor the Gamer, Texan Cowboy Cheese, Poland Country Ball, Yakko, Nevada Garbage Trucks, DW Cool Dude, Soviet Ball, and Serminator. Once again, thank you guys.